Help, hope, and answers. Easter seals today.
Hi, thank you for joining us here on Easter Seals today. I'm your host, Carol Galt, and we have with us Joe Kimmel from the Kimmel Law Firm, Bud Kwalk from Independence Bank, and Eileen duobinis-gray, also from Independence Bank. And thank you all for being with us today.
Our pleasure.
To be here.
Yeah. So let's just take a minute and let you all talk a bit about your backgrounds. Let's start with you, Joe.
My name is Joe Kimmel. I grew up on a farm in southern Illinois. I graduated from University of Arkansas with my JD. Stayed and got an LLM in agricultural law. And now my practice at the Kimmel Law Firm is fairly concentrated on estate planning and Medicaid planning, as well as elder law and VA benefits.
And for lay people like me, an LLM is tax.
It's a letters of law master.
Okay. And what does that help you with?
That gave me an extra year of education that focused in on agricultural law.
Okay,
But
all right.
My focus was on the planning side.
Well, I thought because we were going to be talking today about estate planning and things like that, that it might have been tax. That's why I was asking the question.
Okay,
So people might
okay,
know.
all right.
Okay, Bud, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Now, we've
Okay.
only got a 30-minute show.
Okay.
I'm teasing you.
I'm a trust officer for Independence Bank, and I grew up in Mayfield, Kentucky, went to Murray State University, traveled around a little bit with Continental General Tire, and got into banking about a decade ago. Eileen will tell you more about what we do maybe, but we do retirement plans, manage trusts, IRAs, 401ks, settle estates. Am I stealing all your thunder?
No.
Okay.
I'm Eileen duobinis-gray, originally from the East Coast, grew up in Baltimore in a larger city, and kind of went to the University of Maryland, got a history undergrad. Then I went to Mississippi State and got a wildlife ecology degree. And then I went to LSU and got an MBA. So I went into business and started my banking career. And I tell you all that because it brings a wealth of varied knowledge to what I do today, which is basically work with people, kind of reach the goals they want for their monies, their investments, and their families. And because of the background, I'm able to kind of see various viewpoints of what they're trying to do. And we do that. We help people reach their family goals to make sure their children are taken care of for their lifetime, their grandchildren, great-grandchildren, whether it be education or just through various ways. And like Bud said, we do the estate planning, we do the financial planning, retirement plans. So you can reach your goals through many vehicles. And I think part of that we're going to talk about, today.
Right,
So.
that's exactly right. We are going to talk about those goals in estate planning and some special needs trust.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just start out with you, Joe, and let's talk about what is an estate plan.
Well, an estate plan is simply preparing your property to pass when you pass away. So far, Carol, we're batting 1,000% as far as people dying. Nobody likes to think about it. Nobody likes to admit it. But it's appointed once for man to die and then the judgment. And
Right.
so we know that it's coming. And the question is, what is going to happen to my stuff when I pass away? Now, folks think, well, if I just don't do anything about it, nothing will happen. Well, Kentucky has an estate plan for you. If you pass away, 1/2 of the property in your estate goes to your husband, the other half down to your children. Now, if that plan is okay with you, then maybe you don't need to take an additional step and have a will or a trust. But for most folks, they need to take an additional step.
So, and I think what I'm hearing you say, for instance, if I were to die, someone might say intestate
Intestate, yes. Mhm.
or without a will,
Without a will, exactly.
and I had 5 children, for example,
Mhm.
half of that would go to my husband, and
Exactly.
the other half would be split up among my 5 children.
Exactly. And it would go to them outright. My little brother has Down syndrome. And so it was very important for my parents to get an estate plan in place whereby the property that is going for his benefit doesn't go to him directly, because he participates in a lot of state programs for his education, for his support, for family living arrangements. All those things are governed by state law, And if he has property in his name, it can disqualify him from those benefits. And so it was important for him to have a special needs trust set up so that the property is there for his benefit, but it does not do him harm by excluding him from the governmental programs that he can participate in.
So sometimes you can have a will and a trust
Absolutely.
as well.
Yes.
So we might want to talk about both of those things too.
Yes, absolutely. A will is a document that's executed by someone who's over 18. You have to be over 18 to have a will. All the teenagers out there, I apologize. You can't do one until you're 18.
Tough beans.
But if you're over 18 and you're of sound mind, then you can execute a will. Generally, those need to be witnessed by 2 disinterested witnesses. But here in Kentucky, we also honor what's called a holographic will, which is a will that is entirely in the testator's handwriting. And so we have to bring in experts to testify that, yes, in fact, that is their handwriting, I've seen it, etc. And then a handwritten will can be admitted to probate here in Kentucky.
Okay, all right. So let's talk a little bit again about that special needs trust.
Yes.
I think we have a slide that's up right now. And we talk about the estate plan and who might designate who gets the stuff, as you mentioned the stuff.
Yes, yes. Who obtains the stuff? And for someone like my brother who has Down syndrome, he doesn't need to get the stuff directly. If he does, it disqualifies him from all those governmental programs that he participates in. And so the trustee on his behalf receives property. Okay, and then the trustee is there to act for his benefit. And so whatever he needs over and above what's provided for him by the governmental programs comes out of the trust. The trustee takes care of those.
Okay. Now we're going to get to Bud and Eileen here in just a minute because I want them, we keep talking about a trustee and
Yes.
I want them to explain exactly what a trust is, because obviously a trustee takes part in that trust. So Bud, will you talk just a little bit about a trust?
Yes, most people don't know what a trust is. We talk about a trust can do this, trust can do that, but most people don't really know what a trust is. And it's 2 things basically. You have some assets that need to have control of, and then you have a document, a legal document. Now, almost everybody knows what a will looks like and how a will works. Those are instructions that you give to your executor or executrix on what to do with your assets at your death, just at your death. Now, trust can give instructions to your trustee on what to do with your assets while you're still alive, maybe. Another set of instructions on what to do if I become incapacitated and can't do my own business. Another set of instructions on what to do when I die. And then maybe another set of instructions on what to do long after I'm dead. So that trust document gives the trustee and you a lot more control and power over your assets.
And Eileen, who would be a good example to name as a trustee?
Well, the one thing that an individual has to think about when they're trying to figure out who do I want to be trustee of my trust is, do I want to make an emotional decision? Do I want to name a family member? Do I want to name my best friend? Because a lot of times they'll do that with wills as executor. They'll name the eldest son or someone like that. And what you have to think about is, this is really a financial business decision. So what you want to look for is the traits of a trustee. One, they have to be honest, okay, because they're going to take care of your assets, they're going to take care of your family, they're going to make sure that your trust meets the goals that you set out in that document, okay. Do they have good judgment? Okay, so you got 2 good character traits right now. Now the other thing is, do they know trust law? Do they know tax law? Do they know legalese? Do they know how to pay your bills? Do they know how to run your company? Do they know how to run a farm? Do they, all these questions of a business type that this trustee has to know. Are they going to live forever if you name an individual? And that's where you get into, as Joe said, 100% we're all going to die.
Right.
So when you name a person as a trustee, you fight that. Who do I name as successor trustee? And if I want another individual, who do I name after that? With a corporate trustee, such as Independence Bank, okay, we go on forever, basically. That a corporation will always be there in one way, shape, or form. But and I may be gone, you know, retire, die off type. But but the corporation continues. So your trustee has continuity to it. So that's part of that business decision. You know, do we have the knowledge? It's what we do day in and day out. We have lawyers on staff. We have tax experts on staff. We work with attorneys locally. We work with CPAs locally to make sure that trust is doing what it needs to do from a business standpoint. We hire experts where we need to. We meet with the beneficiaries. We meet with, if you set one up for your children, we will meet with them and make sure they understand what the trust means and what it's going to be doing for their lifetime. Maybe it's for their education, maybe it's for their medical needs. Just whatever you wanted, as Bud said, you can control it after you're gone. So if you wanted to make sure your child, you know, went to college and they didn't get those benefits until they got a college degree, we'd make sure you do that. The one thing that a lot of people don't think about when they're naming a trustee is sometimes the trustee, in order to fulfill the goals of the person who set up the trust, has to be the, quote, bad guy. In other words, if your child comes in and wants a car and they're looking at a Ferrari, you know, and there's money in the trust for that, but we know you as a parent wouldn't want them to have that, would want them to have a Volvo or, you know, a Toyota Corolla or whatever. We say, no, you can have a car, but we're not going to spend that much money of your trust on that. Or, you know, you make decisions that that beneficiary may not like. Well, you know, they'll get over it with a corporate trustee. We won't break up a family, where if you named your brother as trustee, your son may not like his uncle going forward. So again, we get back to making sure it's a business decision as opposed to an emotional one when you name a trustee. You have anything to add?
Yeah, the biggest thing I see when somebody names an individual is they say it's free, doesn't cost anything.
Yeah.
But to hire a corporate trustee or executor of your will, that's a small price to pay to make sure that all your life savings and all your assets end up the way you want them to end up, and they were taken care of properly.
Right, and those are usually done on a percentage of
the assets.
Of the assets, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And it usually matches up with a fee. I'm sure the other trust departments around the country are the same way. We charge for investing your assets. So if you've got your assets invested with maybe a portfolio, a broker or some other institution, probably the fee is the same as what those just do the investments, plus you have the trust benefit on the side. It's not free, but it actually is just an add-on. You're being charged mainly for the investment of your assets.
But Joe, all those decisions can be made in the way the trust is set up, correct?
Yes, we try to put as much instruction as we can into the trust document as far as what the testator or the trustor or the person setting up the trust wants to accomplish. We also try to build in enough flexibility so that the trustee can adapt to changing behavior. You know, when parents set up a trust, for example, for adult children, and everything is fine with the adult children, but later on, maybe the child becomes disabled. You know, maybe they have a stroke, maybe they're in an accident. We try to build the trust in such a way that there's flexibility there, where the trustee can provide for those special needs as well. And so that's what we try to accomplish within the document. When we deal with parents with small children, you know, we set up a lot of trusts for them, because if parents pass away, leaving behind minor children, under state law, if they haven't created a trust, when that child turns 18, they get their inheritance in full. And if you ever want to see a real tragedy, take a look at an 18-year-old with a large check. It can really do some damage, because this is also a child that has lost parents.
Right.
And that puts them in a very difficult situation. And when we're naming trustees, I always ask the parents this: are we naming someone who has the intestinal fortitude to look at children that have lost parents on their 16th birthday and say no? Because that's showing that child a lot of love.
Right.
Restraining that child from doing something that could hurt them is showing them love. And that's usually when they say, let's talk about the corporate trustee. Let's talk about that option. You know, what does that look like?
That's a lot of information. I'm sorry, Eileen, did I
Well,
interrupt?
I was just going to add, we've experienced in a guardianship a child at 18 getting a large sum of money to the tune of close to $200,000, and they went through it in 7 to 10 days, and they had nothing left. And what Joe is talking about is that if you truly want your children to be secure for their lifetime, if you're not around, you want to look at someone who can really say, no, you're not getting that money right now, or no, you're not getting as much, or we're going to save this for a different time, and be able to talk your child and kind of reason with them as best you can with the 16 or 18-year-old. And sometimes it's not the age, it's not the numerical age that's the issue with your offspring.
Mm-hmm.
It's the mature level. You know, some people can't handle money.
Right.
You know, some of my beneficiaries of my trust, they're in their 40s and 50s, and they just were never taught how to handle a dollar. You know, they just don't understand that. So we're able, because I've been in this business since the early 80s.
60s. 60s.
I'm really 104. No. We've been through this so many times that we're able to kind of share some experience. And they don't get it the first time or the 50th time sometimes. But eventually they come around to an acceptance of saying, you know, while that trustee isn't doing, corporate trustee isn't doing exactly what I want, they are doing what my parent wanted them to do. And they really are looking out for me. You know, that's
right.
Because that's what we are. We owe it to the beneficiary and to the grantor, the person who set up the trust, to make sure that we're accomplishing what they wanted by setting up that trust and taking care of those children.
Okay.
It's extremely hard for a corporate trustee to say no, and it's
Yeah.
just about impossible for a family member.
And I
Yeah.
can understand that. I certainly can understand that. All right. Well, we're going to take a break here, and then we'll come back and we're going to discuss some more about estate planning and some other things as well, maybe some more about special needs trusts. So just hang with us, and we will see you back in just a moment on Easter Seals Today.
Open answers. Easter seals today. Open answers. Easter seals today.
Thank you for joining us again here on Easter Seals Today. Now we're going to pick up where we left off, and we're going to talk about some special needs trust again, and we're also going to talk about some specific benefits of trust. So which one of you want to tackle that?
I'll take the benefits. There's a little town down the street from Paducah that when someone dies, many of the people in the community rush to the courthouse to get a copy of the will, to see what that person had and where those assets were distributed. It's public knowledge. A trust isn't that way. Trust is private. Unless you tell somebody you have a trust, nobody will even know you have a trust. So it's very private. That's important to some people. Down the street, I do a lot of business down the street. It can protect your assets. If you have an irrevocable trust, which a special needs trust is usually irrevocable or irrevocable, however you want to pronounce it, or when you die, if you have a living trust, it becomes irrevocable at your death. Any assets in that trust, if it's set up properly, the assets that are in that trust, when it becomes irrevocable, are not yours anymore. They belong to that trust, just like a different person. So if you have creditors, or you have a bankruptcy, a divorce, or whatever that you're going through, they cannot access those assets if it's set up properly.
Is there a limit of how much can go in a trust? Is
I
there
don't
a
know of any
minimal
limits, Joe.
amount? Is there a
There's-
minimal amount of what can go in
Well,
a trust?
shoot us some numbers here, Carol. What do you?
No, I'm thinking a lay person may
Sure.
just be thinking, I don't have a lot, but what I do have is mine. My car and my home, and it may not be a lot, but you always hear about trust and you think of Donald Trump,
Right.
and I'm not Donald Trump, so
It doesn't take very many assets to really use a trust the way it should be used,
Mm-hmm.
to have a trust be beneficial to you. The main thing is your life situation. If you have a perfect life, there's no such thing as a perfect family, I don't think. I've never run into one yet. But if you have a real simple family, very few children, everybody gets along, you may not need a trust. But there's a number of life situations, the disabled child or adult, that is the life situation that a trust can really help out. And it doesn't matter how many assets you've got. It's that life situation is the most important.
right. And I always hear people talk about trust as a tool to avoid taxes, those kinds of things. Again, estate planning.
Can do that, yes.
But sometimes I think the Kentucky law is changing at the end of this year, maybe dropping down to $1 million for estate tax. I don't know. I just know enough about that to be dangerous. But again, some people may not have an estate that's worth $1 million. But would a trust be valuable?
Right. It could be. You're talking about the transfer tax, and Joe can kind of
Correct.
talk to that
Correct.
in a minute. But basically, what you really want to do is figure out what is your goal. Okay, you can have a trust basically with $10. I mean, you just have
That's
to
what
have-
I'm
start out
getting
like
at.
that.
You
That's
just
what I'm
have to
getting
have
at.
assets to put into a trust. Okay. Now, is it practical to have a trust? No, obviously. But if your goal is to say you're a single mom and you have a child that you want to take care of, and you know that they can handle money, okay? And I bet you're probably worth a couple $100,000. Most people, if they sat down, and that's the first step, whether you're doing your will or thinking about a trust, and preferably you're doing both of those at the same time, you want to do an asset inventory. And when you start adding up what you have, well, I got a 401k out there, I've got an IRA, I've got a little passbook savings account, I've got a couple CDs, I've got a house, car, some personal
Insurance policy.
jewelry, you'd be surprised. There was a book years ago, Millionaire Next Door. Most people, they save and they never pay attention to how much they save. And bottom line is, you're probably worth a lot more than you give yourself credit for. So once you do that, then you figure out, okay, I'm worth $250,000. Now what do I do? Do I want to protect that in such a way that I'm protecting my child? And that's when a trust comes into play. Like Bud said, the life situation is, I want to protect my child in case I'm not here. So you can have a trust, in that case, set up with the will that fits your needs. Okay.
Right.
Now, the person next to you may have a different situation, like Bud was talking about, and different amounts of money. So there's a bottom line minimum, but there's a practical minimum. And then when you start going to corporate trustees, where you're actually paying fees, okay, or paying someone to manage your investments like you would go to a broker, you have to think about how much is it that it's worth it. And that's one of the things that corporate trustees do when people come to us, and if Joe has a client who's considering us, we'll sit down with them and say, yes, this can be a win-win situation. While you are going to pay us a management fee for your investments, we can make you that management fee plus more money with your investments than if you kept it yourself.
Right, right. And I think that's what's important for people to hear, because oftentimes I think people think it's just an unattainable goal.
Right.
And that's not necessarily
No.
so. It can be very beneficial. And so to that, we have just a few minutes left, so let's just talk briefly about some special needs trust again. Let's touch on that for disabled adults and others.
A lot of our clients are concerned about the potential cost of a nursing home stay. And if they are in their 60s or their 70s, they may have a real hard time trying to obtain long-term care insurance, which obviously is a great thing to have if you can qualify and afford it. But for those clients that are also trying to leave something behind for their children, they might put a family farm or a trading account or an asset that they know that they want to hang on to and pass down to that next generation into a special needs trust. And once the 5-year look-back period has gone by, those assets won't be counted if they have to have a nursing home stay. And so that's another area where people are really looking at these special needs trusts to try to insulate some of their assets for not only their own care, but also to get down to the next generation.
Okay, all right. Well, that's all very good information. Real quickly, as we start to wrap up here, can you think of 2 or 3 things that one thing that each one of you might want to offer? It's just kind of some parting knowledge.
Well, I'll hit on one more thing that's about the advantage of the trust that I would like to, is the control part. But the trust gives you so much more control. People think I'll lose control of my assets, I put them in a trust. Well, you don't lose control of your assets when you put them in a trust. It gives you more control. It gives you control if you become incapacitated, and it can give you control clear after your death. They're your assets. You're the only ones who can touch them. Even though they're in a trust, they're still yours. You can still have access to them.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, people try to avoid this subject, but that's when we see the worst tragedies, the situations where you have maybe a stepmom and stepchildren that are in litigation in an estate because dad didn't want to face sitting down and putting together an estate plan that would keep the peace in the family. And so I would just encourage everybody to just think about where they're at and what kind of estate plan would make sense for them.
Okay, all right.
And I think the one thing that you want to do to go along with what Joe was saying is that come and ask us questions. You know, Bud and I are available. You know, just come, give us a call. You can ask questions, and we don't charge. You know, initially.
No, I understand.
So, I mean,
understand.
You know, attorneys are a little different because that's legal advice. We would just share life experiences, so to speak. But we can help you kind of get your thoughts in order, maybe answer some basic questions for you before you go to to Joe or to your attorney.
Point you in the right direction, Joe.
Yeah, point you in the right direction.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
As I get referrals from these two, they come very organized with their stuff ready to go, and it does save a lot of time on the attorney's end when folks have taken the time to sit down and really think about what they have and what they're trying to accomplish. So.
And a good thing to remember is keep the goal in mind and what you
Yes.
want to accomplish.
that's right.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. Again, that's Joe Kimmel with Kimmel Law Firm,
Yes.
Bud Kwok from Independence Bank, and Eileen Dubinis-Gray.
Yeah.
She got
I got it right that time.
You got it.
2 in a row.
Well, all right. Thank you all again for joining us. And I'm Carol Galt with Easter Seals Today. We'll see you next time.